Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Hi everybody, welcome to another weekly wrap up, and today we have I think 8 books to go through, and one of them is my most anticipated read of the second half of the year, and I still, as of this moment, about to film it, don't know how I'm going to talk about it. I don't know where I'm going to go with it. I'm sure it'll be long and rambly and over the top as I usually am. So first, before we get into it, we of course have some new supporters to welcome. So I do have a new anonymous friend who doesn't want their name shouted out, but you who's watching, you know who you are. This person joined both my channel memberships and became the second proud producer for their channel. Anyway, this anonymous person joined in both places, and I'm very thankful because that definitely makes a difference. And you make a difference too just by liking and subscribing to the channel. I know there are some silent watchers out there, so please make sure that you're subscribed to my channel and you get the updates. But we then also have Cassandra H who joined, we have Ashley, and we have I Love Dogs 84. Who didn't get back to me with a name to shout out, so that's what we're going with. If you're watching this and that's you, and you'd like your name in the credits as something else, just let me know and I'll fix that up. But anywho, that is who we have to thank. Now let's get into the books because we got some goodies to talk about. Yes, we do. All right. First up, though, I did my beta read of Fake Game for Madison Fox. Now, this is a working title, by the way. We know that's what it is listed on as Amazon and everything, but Madison isn't quite sure if we're keeping that name. I'm not here to discuss all of those details, but that is a working title. That's a working title. I can't tell you much about this book, although even though that is a working title, there is a fake dating situation in here. And I thought it was really good. This couple is actually Deer and Jackson. So they are quite the pair. This is a grumpy sunshine. Deer very much enjoys playing some of the like love games where, you know, you're like trying to win over a character or whatever. She also plays some games with our people in the system, and they're all really good friends. And yeah, this book starts off with something very frightening happening to Deer, and that leads Jackson to feel very protective. And then there's a situation where Jackson's parents are trying to push him into dating and marriage, and Deer, as a way to kind of pay him back, asks to, you know, maybe I should be your fake girlfriend. So there's that. That's all I'm gonna say about it as of now, just because it's in such the early stages of everything, obviously, but it is still slotted to come in October, which will be here before you know it. Or is it November? I think it's November. And it was just lovely. I always love when I get to read it because it leads to some really great discussions with Madison, who's just an absolute joy. She doesn't really keep up with her channel anymore just because the woman, if you don't know, works for Source Books, aka Bloom Books, and she is a busy woman, okay, very busy woman. But she used to have a channel called Paperback Princess, and now it is Madison Fox is what it's called. And there have been some just really fun videos she's done throughout the time. So make sure you follow her. Once in a while she puts up a vlog still, which is really cool. All right, then I read a quick little fanfic, and this one was called Blood Ties by Cullen's Pet. Yes, this fanfic author actually has quite a few Twilight ones as well. I'm almost tempted by one of them, I won't lie. But in this case, of course, it was still Dramini, but it was a vampire fic. And in this one, it is pretty dark, at least for the first third of it. I did find it actually got tamed down quite a bit and even a little bit boring once we got a little later on into it. But the start of it starts with a bang. And Draco has been turned into a vampire, and he's still allowed to live at Hogwarts. He's been given kind of a special room that he has to like apparate into, And, you know, of course, Hermione very quickly and astutely, of course, is like, you can't apparate within Hogwarts. And he makes it clear that only living people cannot apparate in Hogwarts. But anyway, he does have a room. And the very beginning of this is actually him cornering her in the Forbidden Forest. She happened to be there where she shouldn't be. And he gets a whiff of her and decides he's going to feed on her. And not only feed on her, take her back to his lair. Now, he does end up kind of threatening her, where he's like, if you don't willingly become my basically blood slave, I'm gonna kill you, so you should be my blood slave. So like I said, very, very dark to begin with. There are some other things going on with this that don't make it as black and white as it may seem, but then again, I love some forceful Draco, and having him be a vampire and like that being the reason why he's doing that, I also enjoyed quite well, because you know what? There's always room for vampires, in my opinion. I'm always here for that. So very delightful. Really enjoyed that. So yeah, but as I was saying, I really enjoyed that first third of it. But then the fanfic author decided to put in a lot more plot than I think the story could handle. And it did quickly go down from there. So yeah, when I was saying I really, really enjoyed that, the fic overall ended up at a 3-star for me. Because honestly, this was only 40,000 words. So that means it was about 160 pages, right? When it's downloaded to my Kindle. But it should have been shorter. Because there is a particular place that's very obviously an end to this like little novella length thing. And even the fanfic author, it's clear in her like author's notes that she meant it to end there, and then she just tried to keep going, and it didn't work so well. It wasn't that great. So yeah, I would have given the first third like a 4.5 star, but as a whole I gave it a 3-star. But some of you, if you want a quick vampire fic and you like Hermione in there, yeah, it was still a 4 on the spice scale, because he does work her over a few times. And I read Twisted Truths by P. Rain. Now, for some reason, and I tend to think that I just thought that I signed up for this, and I didn't, because I didn't end up getting an ARC or an ALC of this book, and I've had ALCs of the previous 3. So again, I think that I put it in my ARC spreadsheet and assumed I signed up for this ARC, and I didn't. So that's totally fine, because I don't know if I could have squeezed this in before I did anyway. Just because of how busy I am. I know, poor me. It's whenever I whine about being too busy about reading books, I hope you all know, I mean that in the sense of like, oh, poor me, I have so many good books, okay? I'm never actually upset about how busy I am, because I bring it on myself. 90% of it is self-inflicted. And the other 10% is still self-inflicted, because I review books. So, you know, you're going to have those obligations. But I still went ahead and grabbed the audiobook as soon as it was available, because these are duet narrated, and I have loved this. Like, I've really enjoyed the series. It's been a solid, I always say it's been a solid series. They've all been about 4-star reads for me. There hasn't been anything that's like really pushed me over the top. They very stereotypically follow their you know, kind of what they're retelling. This one is a Little Mermaid retelling, and it's about Ariana and Obsidian boss, and he gets an assistant basically hired for him by his brothers, and he's very upset by that because it feels like it's a babysitter, and she kind of is. Now Ariana, she is from a family of thieves. Actually, she's not really trying to be a thief herself anymore, but her father is involved with some bad stuff, and he's actually involved with this woman named Una, which I think you can guess is Ursula, is who that is supposed to represent. And there was actually a situation where Obsidian, he wasn't actively trying to unalive himself, but he was being very apathetic about a situation he was in the water, where he's not actively trying to save himself. Therefore, what is the alternative to that? And Ariana happened to be swimming there. She actually used to be a lifeguard, and she saved his life. So, but she never wanted to say who she was because she knew that her father would try to get her to take advantage of the situation. And she's right. When it gets out that Obsidian Voss was rescued from the water by someone, and there's a picture of her, like not fully of her, but enough that her father and brother know it's her, and they're immediately trying to get her to do something to get money for it. They're like, you deserve it, you did something good, blah, blah, blah. But she doesn't want to. However, it then comes out that her father has been stupid and dangerous, and he owes Una money, and there's no way out of it. And so she agrees to get a job with the Voss family, and this job as the assistant to Obsidian puts her in their house. Now, she doesn't tell him that she's the one who saved him, but she uses it as access to steal items from them and then pass them off to her brother to be sold. And she's planning to do that to pay off her father's debt. So there we go. There is our setup scenario. You can see it's rife for difficulty and drama. And yeah, it goes from there. So as with the other ones in the series, eventually she finds out he has kinky desires. There is a sex club the brothers all co-own, and she gets initiated into that at some point. It all just felt, as I said, I knew it was going to happen. Personally, I have enjoyed this series. As I said, they're a solid 4-star series, but I do feel like if you've read one, you kind of read them all. They don't really ever do enough with the sex club for me to love those parts of it. Like in the first one, it was this big, like, what is there, you know, because that one was the Beauty and the Beast one. But all the rest of them now, it's just kind of like you're initiated into this club in front of your brother, like in front of your partner's brothers, and like it's just, I don't know. So, as you can tell, I myself am a bit apathetic about the book this time. The audiobook, though, of course, was wonderfully narrated by Sebastian York and Kit Swan in duet narration. If you've liked the first 3, you'll probably like this one too. As I said, it was no hardship to listen to it, but I did find myself dragging my feet with it a little bit because, again, I wasn't going to be surprised by anything that happened. And yeah, so it landed at a 4 for the rating, but I could have taken or leaving it as it is. It just wasn't anything super inspiring, as it were. Okay, next up was a reread of What You See by Cherise Sinclair. I've been rereading this series for a patron, so I've been annotating it as I go. This is book 3 in the Sons of the Survivalist, and this one is about Bull, B-U-L-L, like Bull Moose, because he's the biggest brother. He does co-own parts of the town with the other brothers. That's the whole thing of this. He is the one he owns a bar and restaurant in town, and he's the one who tends to like hire a lot of people that are our characters. There's kind of someone in every book that like has something to do with Bull's bar and restaurant because there's only a couple places to eat. And we have Frankie, who this is actually like books 3 and 4 are the ones most closely interlocked, though they all are like you have to read them in order. You have to. It's one story. Books 1 through 4 are one story. But this one is like books 3 and 4 like are my favorites in the series, not only because we've built up the characters, we know them so well, but we have Frankie, who, funny enough, I have 2 Frankies to talk about this week, which is kind of funny. I guess I love them. So, but yeah, she's Francesca Bologna. No, Belanti, I think is her name. And we won't go into her whole background, but she has a best friend named Kit. And Kit got involved with a very bad husband. And so she has a young boy named Eric, and Kit and Eric are forcibly a part of the Patriot Zealots. And if you've been reading the series, you know that is a religious cult that is right outside the town of Rescue. And so we've had to deal with them being sexist and racist and jackasses through the whole series. But now it really ramps up because Kit is married to one of the high-ranking members in there, and she had married him when she lived in Texas, but then things like escalated, and now he has her in Alaska, and she's completely isolated. She has no friends or family. Now, Kit was able to slip out a letter that got to Frankie. Frankie lives in New York, I think it is, and her family, like I said, we won't go into all of hers, but her family is in the fashion industry, and Frankie works kind of the office side of that and everything. And she gets this letter from Kit, and Frankie is actually the godmother of Eric, and Kit has sent guardianship papers to her to say, if something happens to me, like, I need you to get Eric out. It's not good. I could die at any time. She's being beaten and raped there by multiple people in it, and it's awful. And so Frankie, who, again, life's not perfect for her, but she does live a very, like, pretty privileged life in New York, but she has this deep feeling for Kit, and, you know, they had went to college together, they were, like, best friends, and Frankie never liked this man that Kit was marrying, but you know how it is, sometimes you don't listen. Kit was really looking for someone to take care of her and be Eric's dad, and at the time, this husband acted like he would do that. And now that she's in the compound there's really no hope. So Frankie comes to town. Now, there were some things in this letter that give us pause, because in the letter, which again is like, it's taken a while for this letter to get to Frankie, and things have happened in rescue since this letter went out. But at the time, one of the Patriot Zealots was actually one of the cops in town. He since, like, we figured that out in a previous book, and he doesn't work there anymore. But at the time when Kit wrote that letter, that's what she knew. And so when Frankie gets to town, she actually ends up with a job at Bull's bar and restaurant there, because that's how she thinks she'll be able to get the best lay of town. She's starting to get to know people, trying to figure out where the PZs are, what's the lowdown. She wants to spy on their compound. Like, this woman, she is going to get her friend and this boy out, whatever she has to do. And that's why, like I said, I just feel for it so much, is because she is so brave to do this, you know? Like, she can't just call the FBI or the police to do it, because they'll give them the runaround or they'll kill them. Like, the way in this story, it's very present, the fact of, like, this does exist within the real world. So there are discussions of previous cults who've, like, you know, liquidated the women and children and themselves when they were surrounded or attacked. So Frankie's very cautious about that. And as she starts to get to know the people in rescue, right, she's very suspicious of the police officers, which at this point are two people that we love. You know, it's JJ and it's Gabe, who are from the other books, and they're part of the family. But she was told that one of them is a PZ. She doesn't know that they got rid of that loser, right? And so she's just trying to be really careful. So I love that about Frankie. And the way that Bull comes into this is, again, she starts working at his restaurant. They get off to kind of a rocky start because she overhears something out of context that kind of pisses her off. But eventually we get that worked out, and they're kind of having a, like, fling while she's there. And she is very hesitant to tell anyone. And now when you're reading it, you're like, woman, tell them what's going on. But again, it's very clear from her perspective, like, why she isn't telling them. You know, she's trying to be cautious. She also knows that, you know, as she gets to know Gabe and JJ, she knows they will want to help, but she's afraid of how that help could adversely affect Kit and Eric. But the reason, as I said, this one and the next one, like, are my favorites, is because of how we see the town all come together. And the whole purpose of this series, the purpose of the mission that was left to these 4 adopted brothers, was to revitalize the town of Rescue, bring them together, make it a community again, make it a place worth living. And as we go through the series, we see more and more people trust the brothers. We see the brothers let people into their lives, and we see them go to bat for other people the whole time. And we really see that at the end, the culmination of this book, when we are going to bust in and get Kit and Eric, and a lot of other stuff happens too. So I love this one. This one's a 5-star reread for me. And I just love it so much. But again, you do have to start with not a hero. which is, as I've said, just, you know, when I read it a couple months ago again, it is to me kind of the weakest book, because like Gabe is kind of the least interesting of the brothers, but he is a very important character too, and we love him in other books. And I mean, I liked him in his book too. Like, I'm not trying to rag on Gabe. I just mean, I know there's some people who read the first book and are just kind of like me, and to me it's all foundational, because then you get Kaz's book and like he's a surprise single dad, and then we get Frankie and Bull, and then the final book, which I can't wait to reread because again, favorite, is Hawk, who is the brother who has the most PTSD and is the most scarred, you know, all those things. And then Kit, who we, you know, spoiler alert, like, we're gonna get her out of there. And she is now like a very abused, scary woman. So they both have types of PTSD. So anyway, love that series. Really happy to be rereading it. There's actually 2 of my patrons who want these books, and I'm like, it warms my heart so much that people want these. I know the covers. I wish she would recover her books. I'm just saying. These could have such beautiful, like, nature scenes. Like, I know, Bull, he's sexy. It's great. But these are very awkward covers here, right? If this was, like, recovered with, like, nature scenes on them, I have a feeling a lot more people would try them, because I'm a cover snob, too. I say this every time. The viewer who got me to read these, I was never going to pick these up, okay? She suggested them a few times, and I'm like, okay, no thanks. Until for Christmas one year, she sent them to me. And I was like, geez, woman, you sent me all 4 books, okay. And I tried one. And then I was like, I love when I'm proved wrong. I really do, I do. But this cover doesn't help when I'm trying to pimp it out to people, you know, because I understand the pain. But now it's in my hands, and I have a louder voice, and I'm more obnoxious than this sweet viewer can ever be. So I'm telling you, start with Not a Hero. Read it on your Kindle. You don't have to look at the cover, right? Just read it on the Kindle or listen to it. The audiobooks are fantastic. Okay, moving along. I will quickly mention I had a DNF. This is one I DNF'd, and I don't know that I'll pick it back up again. I was actually communicating with one of you viewers on Instagram, and she was asking me like why I DNF stuff and everything. And I know I've talked about that in quite a few videos, but I'll bring it up with this one too, because I'm happy to answer questions like that all the time, because, you know, there's new viewers every day and you won't always know. So DNFing for me usually has 2 reasons why I DNF. I mean, there are multiple reasons why I DNF, but the main 2, it has to do with content, or it has to do with I just got busy and bored and I am reading too many things, and so I'll put it aside. And that can be like a soft DNF. It doesn't mean I'll get back to it, but when I DNF a book because I'm just like reading too much, that was nothing against the book. It just happens sometimes, right? I am a mood reader first and foremost, though, as I say, I am a reformed mood reader in a lot of ways, because I have such a big TBR every month that I have to read. I'm still a mood reader within that TBR quite a bit. But the other reason is for content. And that doesn't always mean it's a triggering content, but it can be just content where I'm like, I don't like what I'm reading, okay? So that long intro, the book that I DNF'd was actually Asking for Trouble by Gianna Darling. And I feel like it's apropos, because I feel like I'm asking for trouble by saying that I DNF'd this. And I probably won't be picking it back up. It doesn't mean I'm like out of the series. I will still try again, but I got about 70 pages in. This is only 300 pages, although I thought it was going to be a novella. 300 pages is not a novella. Yes, it's still half the size of her other books, but it's still a full-size book, you know? And I got 70 pages in, and I'm like, this isn't going to get better. And a lot of times why I do that is because, you know, we also talk about, there was that person a while ago who was like, I don't trust you because you never rate anything lower than blah, blah, blah. And I say, that's because I DNF things. And this is a case of that, where I would have rated this one probably a 3 or less. Maybe, okay? Again, maybe. I don't know that. But I wasn't liking it, and I was already starting to skim. And if I'm already starting to skim when we're at 50 to 70 pages, I know it's not going to be great. So I know everyone's gaga over this. I love Gianna Darling. This isn't me, like, again, flipping her off. Like, I liked Caution to the Wind. I love Dead Man Walking. I like, what's it called now? Walk on the Wild Side? What's it called? Dude, why can't I remember the great title? Oh, not Dead Man Walking, but I don't know. I'll put up the cover. I like those in the series. I do. I think they're very good. But something that's been tougher for me since I picked her back up again, and this was tough with Caution to the Wind as well, is I never realized how aggressive her biker speak is. I just did not notice before. And it is absolutely obnoxious that even the words in the hero's heads, he's dropping G's and skipping letters, and it's just like, it makes me feel like I have a problem reading. And I know a lot of people want to have this problem. I bet if I did the audiobook, it might be a little better, but it just is too much. Like, I don't know. There's some way to show consistency of voice, I feel like, without completely writing in this almost alien fashion to me. So that was one aspect, is I like get into it and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I remember this being really rough the last time. Yeah, this is tough. But then also what the story is, this book starts with a gas station robbery. It starts with a woman named Blue, who we find out is kind of like has escaped from a biker gang. And then we have Boner, whatever we're calling him, Bonner, I don't know, I don't care, who like rescues her from that, and they end up having to like run for it, and then it's insta-love. And then for me, I ended up at about 70 pages looking up some reviews and seeing some things where I'm like, no. So I won't go into all of those things that made me put it down, because they would be spoilers, and I haven't even read the book. So it's one thing, you guys know I'll do a spoiler section in a video, but I'm not going to do a spoiler section when I haven't actually read it. I just read people's reviews, and we all know I read the good reviews and the bad reviews too, because again, most of my friends are obsessed, but I also know that like we all have our own biases. Like, I love Gianna Darling. She's a wonderful human. I've met her, and she's just as sweet in person as she was in video calls that we'd had before. But it just didn't work for me. It just didn't work for me, and I don't have to make it work for me. There are enough of my other friends who will crow about her, and if you want to hear a hyped review, definitely go check out one of their channels. But there was just enough for me where I'm like, this one's not going to be for me. I don't like how this couple is, how it's going to work. Yeah. So anywho, that's enough of an explanation, but that is just kind of some reasons why I DNF. And again, it doesn't mean that I wouldn't have liked it, but in general, this is what I was going to say, because I haven't brought it up in a long time. When I read books that I'm reading as assigned reading, you know what I mean? So if a patron picked it, if it's my book of the month, if it's a book club book, if it is a viewer recommendation. So this was way back when, I remember saying this, when I first opened the book rec form. This was, over 3 years ago now, I think at this point. Whenever I tried one of those books, I would give it a minimum of 50 pages. And a maximum of 100 pages if I would DNF it or not, because then I felt like I would give a book a fair shake, and if it wasn't working, I would DNF it and move on to the next one. But that's just kind of my stance anyway. I've been that way the whole time I've had a YouTube, and you can go back and see in some places. Like, I give a book 50 to 100 pages, and if I'm not in it by then I'll just tap out, and there's no harm, no foul to it. So that's just a general rule anyway. And this one, I gave it 70 pages, and it wasn't working for me. So enough of that. Let's continue on. So then I read a book that this has been on my Kindle for ages and ages and ages. It was way far back in there. And with me having read some of Sawyer Bennett recently, her cowboy books she's had, I was like, oh yeah, I have a few of her books on my Kindle. And I read a few before. Like, that's how I even had my eye caught by the cowboy ones. I was like, oh, Sawyer Bennett. But I read Uncivilized by Sawyer Bennett. And then we'll just talk about it together. I read Love Uncivilized, which is a novella that takes place 8 years later. But Uncivilized is a Tarzan-esque retelling. And we have a hero named Zach who has been in the jungle for, I think it was 15 to 18 years, that like his family was missionaries. His parents got killed. He ended up being raised there. Well, his godfather has always wanted to know what like happened, and there was some word of like he had been found, basically is the point. And so this godfather hires this anthropologist, who her name is Moira. She's a doctor, and he asks her to go and go with this group to get his godfather and to try to communicate with him, because supposedly, because she's an anthropologist and knows some about these people, that she would be a good person to go. I don't know. It's a bit weak why she gets there. I did like once they met, and so he's very primitive. The people that he lives with, the women are basically kind of like free use for any man. It's done in this like respectful manner though, how I say it, like it isn't a like assault kind of free use type of thing, if that makes sense. When you read the beginning, you'll see. But the women, the unpartnered women, are, you know, basically willing for any man who's there. And Moira is very caught by Zach. He's absolutely beautiful. And once we start communicating with him, they get him to agree basically to a year in the world. So like come meet his godfather and try living as a man in there for a year, and then he'll go back. Like that's all he will promise. So he ends up coming back, and he ends up like living with Moira, who then like they're living with his godfather, but she's staying there to like help integrate him. And Zach has come, like he was willing to be there, but it's also very clear that he's very attracted to Moira, and his main goal is to like get her to submit to him and have her. So very soon into him coming to America, like he's fucking Moira like all the time. And it ends up being kind of this like, they have an end date for their relationship supposedly, but you know, and is Zach gonna feel like he still owes his family in the jungle, right? Because he is loved by this group. He's been there for years. They're the family he remembers best. He doesn't remember his godfather really. So that's kind of the push and pull, is like how that's gonna go. And then, and I actually just finished this one last night, but we'll read these two together. I read Love Uncivilized, which is just this 80-page novella that updates us on Zach and Moira. And it's now 8 years later. Spoiler, they're together. It worked out. They have 2 kids. And it's that kind of typical check-in of like, they're both very busy in their lives. He now has went to school and he has a job, and it's just a lot of pressure and a lot of work and everything. And he feels like he needs to prove himself even more, because he only really got his schooling in the past few years. And she's had to put some of her dreams on hold to have their kids. So it's that kind of like marriage in trouble. They used to have such animal sexual desire for each other, and like life has really snuffed a lot of it out. How are we going to keep it? You know, that type of thing. So I should tell you what I did. So Uncivilized, I gave 4 stars, and it was a 4.5 on the spice scale, mostly for quantity. There is some kinky stuff they're doing, because again, he's very dominating. There were toys used, there's anal, there's a bunch of spicy little things that they do. Some kind of dubcon to start with things. But yeah, it's mostly just, you know, that type of thing. Is why I gave it 4.5, is there's like sex in almost every chapter after a certain point. And it was hot. I'm not saying it's not hot. It just was very repetitive, because that's their connection. But when you read Love Uncivilized, having read that and seeing how sexual and intimate they are, it is like, you can see how different things are, because they are when you have 2 kids and 2 jobs and all the things. So I did give the novella one 3.5 stars, because it just, I didn't like feel it as much as I did with the other ones. Okay, so now let us talk about my most anticipated book, which was Heart of Frost and Scars. So, of course, I'm going to talk about some very vague things to do with this book, remind you a bit about what the previous ones were about, and then I will have I say small, it will probably be a long spoiler section, but I am not going to spoil the whole thing. But I will tell you some of the things I was picking up on and all that, okay, if that makes sense. But if you don't want to know anything about this one because you're anticipating it, skip till I put up the photo of the next book, because as you know, I won't keep the photo of this up the whole time because that's tough on my video size. But don't come back until I put up the next photo if you don't. And for those of you who want to know some of it but don't want spoilers, I'll talk in general and then I'll put up a spoiler card. Okay? That makes sense? Okay, cool. So, we got this book. Pam had a bit of trouble getting the arcs sent out to start with, but the way that she did it this time is she sent us the email. Those of us who had reviewed books 1 and 2, she sent it to us and was like, the arcs are ready right now. So as soon as you fill this out, I will be sending the arcs out. Well, I guess Google got mad at her for how many arcs she was sending out, or how many emails she was emailing, because of course she sent us the email to sign up, and then people are emailing back, and then she's going to email arcs, and it got mad at her, right? So I was just anticipating, because she put a post on her Instagram that the arcs are ready to go out. As soon as Google will let me start sending again, I'll send them. So I got this on Wednesday night, and I dived right into it. As you guys know, if you saw last week, I reread both books 1 and 2 in this. Or was it in the last 2 weeks? No, I read them both last week, right? Yeah, I reread books 1 and 2 to prepare. And I took a ton of notes, and I made a lot of guesses. And again, when we get to the spoiler section, I'll tell you what my guess was. I won't tell you if it happened or not, but I'll tell you what my guess was. But this series, just in case you've missed it, is about, it starts anyway, the first book is about anyway, this woman named Frankie, as I said, 2 Frankies this week. This woman named Frankie who lives in Alaska with her husband. They've been married a couple years. Very dominating, possessive man. There's a 20-year age gap between them. She's 29, he's 49. But they just have this crazy chemistry together. She's a nurse, a trauma nurse. He is a businessman, billionaire. And in the very beginning of Hills of Shivers and Shadows, they have a huge fight because Frankie has found out she's pregnant. He has always told her that he didn't want to have a child. It's a really bad fight, and he's like, well, you're going to get rid of it. And she's like, excuse me. It's very ugly, makes him look very bad. It's just very like, there's just a lot going on. And so she's like, if you go to work right now and don't stay here and talk with me, I'm going to leave. And he's like, fuck that. And he leaves because he wants to cool off, which I don't disrespect him wanting to cool off because we don't always behave the best when they were really pissed at each other, right? The way this started. But she starts like packing her bag, but she isn't actually planning to leave. She's just angry, and she's like, why is he being this way? Why is he being so aggressive about this? I know he said he didn't want a child, but you know, something obviously got off with birth control, whatever, and like, we're gonna handle it. And before any more can happen, before Monty can come back and grovel, before she can come up with a plan, you know, maybe she was gonna go, but she wouldn't have went far. But she gets kidnapped by a man in the middle of the night. And we get his POV too. We actually start the book with his POV. And that's Denver. He kidnaps her. Lots of stuff happens for there, but he takes her to the Hills of Shivers and Shadows, which is in Alaska, in the Arctic Circle. This little like homestead type place with a cabin and a shed and a greenhouse set up there. And he has 3 sons, a 20-year-old, a 25-year-old, and a 30-year-old. And they're all trapped here. Denver is the only way in and out. He flies the plane in, and we're there. Okay? That's that. I've talked in depth about those ones, but just giving you a refresher of like, that is where we started with the series. Book 2 is, so book 1 very much feels like a thriller mystery. Some very dark things, as I said. Check out the reviews I've done of those for trigger warnings and for more in depth about what's happening there. But that one's kind of like thriller horror thing. Book 2, some of the people from that one have died on us. And now there's just a few people left out of Hills and Shivers and Shadows. And that second book, Cage of Ice and Echoes, is like a survival story. Because of reasons, they're stuck there. And we have Frankie now with the men she's stuck with, how are they going to get out of there? None of the people there can fly, like just all these things. They're going to run out of food, all this. And in that book, we also then have Monty, who we're seeing what's been happening from his point of view all this time, that he couldn't believe his wife was actually gone. But not only is she gone, because again, he knew she was pissed, he was pissed, all of this was happening, but he came back and she actually was gone. And even like crazier, he couldn't find her. And that is what we see when we're following Monty's point of view, is he's a billionaire. He has unlimited resources in his hands. He knows his wife could hide from him, but how could she hide to this degree? How could she have just disappeared? She didn't pop up with a job somewhere else. She didn't, because she hadn't taken any money from him, and she has limited funds of like her own, you know. She isn't working anywhere. So he's spending, which we like kind of go back to the beginning for him, and we see his journey during the months she's gone, and the timelines are slowly converging. Okay? That's what happens in Cage of Ice and Echoes. So now, the quick, non-spoilery whatever for Heart of Frost and Scars is, if you read the first two books, you know there was a riddle that was left for us at the end of book 2. We had some wins, and we had some scary revelations, and we have a lot of questions. However, a lot of questions were actually answered. So we're in this weird place at the end of book 2 where she answered like the author, like Pam has answered pretty much every question she left us with in the first book, because the end of the first book we have so many questions. The end of the second book, not so many questions, but we're still left with this like devastation of what's going on. So book 3 is kind of split into two things happening. Well, kind of three things happening. There's the healing portion. We need to heal from what we've been through. There's a relationship portion. This is a Why Choose story. It's also now, you know, going to be a bit of a second chance thing too, because we do have Monty back in the picture, right? And then it's also, there is a little mystery that got laid down at the end of book 2 that didn't have anything to do like with questions from book 1, but it's now like our new mystery. So that is my like mostly non-spoilery part of everything. Let's go into book 3, slight spoilers here, okay? So for those of you who I don't even know what category you fall into. You decide. If you don't want to know a single thing, hopefully you've already booted out of here or have skipped further ahead. But going into this book, all right, so now this is for people who have read book 1 and 2, right? Going into this third book, there was a riddle that Denver left us that had to do with there's someone who's stalking you, who stayed quiet, their heart has been frosted over, and they're, you know, all these, Denver leaves this riddle that was super annoying, and it's like, fuck you, Denver, you're dead, just stay dead, leave us be. And when I reread the books, right, last week, I took a lot of notes, and there was a couple things that I had questions about. One of them was, is Wolf really dead? I was sure that Denver was really dead. And the reason why I was absolutely sure that Denver wasn't fucking with us from, you know, being alive is there's a line at the beginning. There's a line at the beginning of book 2 that said his face looked like a squashed tomato. Okay. When Cody is throwing his body outside, he said his face looked like a squished tomato, and he had been shot with an arrow in the leg. That's how he like bled out. And then she had beaten him with a lead pipe. Like, he's dead. He's dead. Doesn't mean he isn't still fucking with us, but he's dead. But I didn't know about Wolf. So, you know, Wolf jumped off the cliff in the first one. I think he'd also been shot by Cody because Wolf was trying to like take Frankie over the edge with him, is what was going on. And I wondered if Wolf was still alive. Now, one of the reasons why I thought maybe Wolf was still alive, and again, I'm still referring to like in the previous 2 books, not in this one, but I'm telling you like what one of my guesses is I was like, is Wolf still alive? Because in book 2, there was a very particular thing to me where there is a flash drive, the one that has the riddle on it and everything. Denver gave us a riddle to get to the flash drive. The flash drive has a video on it that we see at the end of book 2. But it also, in the box that had the flash drive, there was the flight manual for the plane, which we had to have, the men had to have to figure out how to fly, and it was in there. But the thing that I was confused about is who put the flash drive in this box, because Denver filmed the video after Frankie was already with him. He makes a trip back to get food and everything, and he films a video in Frankie and Monty's home, sitting on a couch, and he films a clip. Now, when he gets back from that trip, I didn't see when he left that he could have put that flash drive in the box. I just didn't know when. Now, there is a part in the book, though, when Wolf goes to collect coal, and the place where he collects coal is near the cave where the flash drive was. So I thought, did Wolf put the flash drive there? Is he secretly love this man who has fucked with him so much? But, well, I mean, poor choice of words. Does he like love him somehow and is helping? And he jumped off this cliff and has been stalking them, because they do have a stalker in this. And there are things that happen that very much do make you think that Wolf did it. We also, now that Monty knows about this cabin and he knows that Wolf is his son, yes, in case you have forgotten, Wolf is his son, Cody is his brother, and Leo is his nephew. Okay, that's how these men are all related to each other. And he wants to find Wolf's body so that they can bring him home and bury him. And nobody can find the cabin, and nobody has found the bodies that are there. So that is an ongoing thing in book 3, is not only does Monty have teams looking for the cabin, but also Cody and Leo make different trips out looking for it as well in the plane. And they never find it through the story. So I had a guess going into number 3 that Wolf was alive. And I had no idea who was stalking us if it wasn't him. And I was not prepared for what the answer was, okay? Because this third one turned very like horror again at a certain point in the book. Again, a good portion of this is on the healing. How are these 3 alpha males going to share Frankie? Is that going to work? Is someone going to lose? It is a why choose. So, spoiler alert, this one does have a happy ending. It does. This book has a happy ending, and it felt very satisfying what this happy ending was. Extremely satisfying, okay? But anyway, how is this going to work out? Because to start with, Frankie is absolutely not interested in being back with Monty, but when she left Monty to Monty, she's still his wife, who he's been missing all this time. He did sleep with his assistant. She's been sleeping with 2 men all winter long. But in her mind, like, he cheated first, but that's also, she knows that's not fair. But she's like, even if I had left, he very quickly slept with someone else. But he even says, he's like, I never, like, it was... And he's like, there's no excuse for it. I own it. But also, you've been fucking other men for 9 months. And we eventually have to get to this place where, like, are we going to wipe the slate clean or not? Also, Frankie, Leo, and Cody are very suspicious of Monty. And Denver wanted them to be suspicious of Monty. And he worded some of his riddle to make it seem like it could be Monty who's actually doing this. He would have the money and the resources to do a lot of it. But luckily for Monty, they just know how shocked he is by all the things he's found out. And though they are distrustful because they've had their minds fucked with for the men their entire lives, Frankie for the last year, they've just had their minds so bent. And so Monty's offering them a safe place to live because he has his private island outside of the city, and like, he has guards and protectors and all of these things, but there's still someone who is slowly sending them body parts of people who wrong them throughout the book. So one of them being, and I'll tell you this one of the first things the stalker sends, besides a note or a letter or a text, is a heart in a box. And when they do the DNA test of that heart, it's Denver's. So that was also confirmation that Denver is dead. but there are other body parts of things that start showing up. So anyway, I don't know what else that I'm saying about this. So it gets horror-y again. That was my point of bringing up a heart in a box. Not the only body parts that show up throughout it, but one of the ones that it was like reassuring in a sense, but it also disturbs you, because what does that mean? It means that the person who's stalking them has been to Haas and was somehow able to get Denver's body before it was completely devoured by wolves and bears. And I will not pretend that I didn't feel a little bit gypped that his body wasn't eaten by the wolves, because when that happened, when we are told that's happening in book 2, I was so freaking happy because I wanted him to be torn apart by wolves and bears. But unfortunately, we discover that whoever is stalking them was able to do that. Okay, so I've said enough, I think, even for like the spoilery part of it. I'll wait a while, I think, to talk about the final spoilers of this because there are some crazy ones. I'm thinking about doing a separate video that's just focus on those so that people can choose when to come to it and when to not. Also, because I think it's such a masterpiece, I could literally talk about it for hours. For hours could I talk about this trilogy. It's blown my absolute motherfucking mind. Like, oh my gosh. I give the trilogy a 6-star as a whole. I did love the romance work that gets done in this one. I really do. I teared up multiple times. There's a lot of work that everyone has to do. This is not easy. They don't just all fall into bed together easily. There's hurt that happens. There's pain. There's trauma. There's so much that has to get worked through. And Pam doesn't blink away from any of it. There are some absolutely tender moments between not only Frankie and Monty and Frankie and Leo and Cody, but Leo and Monty and Cody and Monty and them, you know, Monty hasn't had any family in years either. His family was all crazy or dead, like, so he thought. And Cody and Leo have only lived with this absolute psycho who raped them and abused them. They don't know any positive male romances except like each other to each other. And so there's some absolutely beautiful moments. And what I really, really appreciate about Frankie, and it's why, you know, I made a video earlier this month about my favorite female characters, and this book just moved her even further up my list, because she not only is a huge proponent for the therapy, because she's like, there's no fucking way we're going to be okay without some head doctors, okay? We must have them. We must have people to talk to about this, because there's no way we can be healthy at all if we don't. But she also is aware how important those male relationships are for those men, and how she wants Cody and Leo so bad. She does still love Monty, but she's like, I don't want to tear you guys apart when I want you guys to come together, you know, even without me being a sandwich and all of it. Like, I want you guys to have a family connection that isn't, you know, that you guys can lean on each other too. So anyway, I know I had a lot to say. So you let me know if you would like a separate video about this so that you can go to it once you've read the trilogy, or if you just don't plan to read it but you want more like detailed stuff on it. I've taken enough notes in the first 2 books that I definitely could do that. And also, as soon as I get the 3rd book, I'm gonna make all the notes in that one too, because I need to reread it and pick up some stuff. I will say, again, non-spoilery to come to the end, there was one thing in particular I was right about that I guessed. There was one particular thing that I was right about. And there was quite a few others that I'm like, of course, was like, oh wow, didn't even think of that. And then there was one that I don't know if Pam noticed. And I don't want to be that viewer or reader who's like, bitch, did you forget about this? Because it is something that like I noticed that I was really like needed that piece of the puzzle to put things together, and it never was addressed in all 3 books. So I was like, I feel like maybe she forgot about it, and like that's okay. When you read this trilogy, you know how many strings this woman was whipping around to make work. I shudder to think of putting a story like this together. It is so far beyond my skill. But there was one thing that I was like waiting for it to be explained the whole time, because I was like, okay, she's gonna tell me about this piece, and it never was. And I'm like, oh, I must just, whatever. So anyway, how is this video still an hour? We still have one other book about real quick. Okay, so I hope you came back or skipped over to here. So the last book to talk about is Love Me by Tiffany Patterson. This is a part of the Townsend Legacy. Oops, I forgot something in here. This is Townsend Legacy Book 2, right? So I actually talked about this in a different weekly wrap-up when I read, what are they? Love Me, Trust Me, whatever. The third one that I read last month, the very end of last month, I had an ALC of that. And what had happened is I had listened to an ALC of book 1 and then an ALC of book 3. And Must Love Audio never had an ALC for book 2. They never did. And I was like, oh, I skipped a book. And when I looked it up, book 2 is a Friends to Lovers. And the hero dares the heroine to give him 3 months to prove that he's her soulmate. And I was like, double dog diggity, I want to read that. And I grabbed it on Kindle, and of course I didn't know when I was going to get to it, but I was going to read it. And then one of the other publishers, I think this one is a Wordsmith Publicity. I was, looking for arcs, because I have so much room for arcs, but I look ahead to see what's coming in like the winter months. And Love Me was available for an ALC, and I was like, what? So I asked for it, and they sent it right over. And so I listened to an ALC of this one. So this is about Monique and Diego, and of course they're part of the family, so you'll see that when you read it. And I just love the found family aspect of these two, because actually both of them have dads that like adopted them. So like they were their mom's kid that their mom had with some like jackass or whatever. So they definitely bonded through that. But anyway, Monique has lived in a different city for a while, and she had a fiance there. She has type 1 diabetes that does, which affects every day of your life. It's a constant thing that you have to take care of. And her fiance has just recently dumped her, and he said it was related to how much work she was as a diabetic. So she feels very guilty about that. But she ends up moving back home, and her best friend lives there. And he had, of course, kind of pulled away while she was engaged to another man type situation. But now that she is free of him, he asks her, please give me a chance. Let me prove to you that we're meant to be, because honey, we're meant to be type of scenario, right? And so that's what she agreed. So they agreed to it. They agreed to date for 3 months. And of course, he's amazing. It's amazing everything that he does for her. So he works for the family business. He's an architect. She is starting to open her own art gallery where she's planning to feature marginalized voices. The place is going to be called like Forgotten Voices or something like that. And so she's actually scouting these artists who don't have a place to put their work, that she wants to feature them. And that whole thread through it was just so beautiful. Like it really, really was. There's this woman who is really badly scarred and she doesn't want people to see her. So like, I think it's her brother posts her art. And then there's a woman who, she was like a grandma, and she had done all this art basically in secret because she was a homemaker. She's had 10 kids and all these things, and she, like, art was her side hobby. And I think it's her granddaughter, like, finds her art in the home she's inherited, and this art gets put there. So there's like all these little side stories about that. It was so beautiful. I just adored this one. It's definitely my favorite in the series, though. All three of the men are very domineering, but this one was definitely kind of like the softest because of Friends to Lovers. But they both still have some damage. Like I said, they both had really horrible dads. Diego's dealing with the death of his birth father, who he just hates, but he's dealing with drama with that. And then like Monique, she's actually the product of an assault on her mother. She just carries a lot of like guilt for being something difficult for her mom to get through. So there's like a lot of pain right there she's dealing with. but it's really beautiful. I love their relationship. There was, of course, a great rep for type 1 diabetes. I've been reading a lot of books that had diabetes rep in them lately, and I love to see it. That's beautiful. So yeah, I gave this one 5 stars. Highly recommend. 3.5 on the spice scale. Little bit of bondage, little bit of spank and a tickle in this one. Super sexy. I mean, all the books in this series have been sexy. It's great. Diego is a dream man. Okay, there's no other way to say it. This is a Black author. This is a Black couple. They were fantastic. The narration is Diego and Monique. Or wait. That's the character's name. The narration for Diego and Monique is Sean Kristen and Jay Shawnee Michaels. Beautiful voices, beautiful performance. Highly, highly recommend this. Now, I'm going to say this, and I want to be clear, like, it's not just because of Black characters why I'm going to make this comparison. I'll be specific about why. I got a little bit of Kennedy Ryan vibes from this author in this one particularly. And the reason I bring that up is the way the hero, like, is helping the heroine with her dreams, the way that he wants to make these things come true, the way he's absolutely a Prince Charming to her is, and the way he talks about her and thinks about her. And then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but then when it turns dirty, it just has this, like, deep connection because of how much he treasures her. So then when things get dirty, it feels so hot. I don't know how to say that. And that's something I feel when I read, like, Kennedy Ryan's books, because you're, like, literally crying in one moment from how romantic it is. And then they're, like, getting it on and you're just like, ugh. You know, there's just a way that she does that. So I'm not making that comparison for any other reason than, like, I feel like it's a good, if you like this, try this scenario. And that's really hard to find with Kennedy Ryan, right? You know, she's just so, you know, like, I have lists of favorite authors, and then there's just, like, Kennedy Ryan, you know, she's up there with very few other authors for me. So I'm not, like, I don't want to make that comparison and have you be let down by any means, but I also am like, I feel like there's something there. Okay, I feel like there's something there, particularly with this book. I'm not necessarily saying that for books 1 and 3 in this, but this book particularly is, like I said, the best work I've read by the author, and this couple was amazing. So there we go, another hour-long wrap-up. If you would like to get any of these books I've mentioned, I do have links down below. When you use affiliate links, it's another way to support the channel. Whether you do get the ebook, the audiobook, or the paperback, the clicks through the links all help me, so please check that out. Again, if you want to support me through Patreon or channel memberships, all of that helps as well. But at the end of the day, you can just leave me a heart or a thumbs up or a comment about one of the books that I was talking about, and that all helps so much. So thank you for watching, my friend, and we'll see you next time. Bye.